So first of all, I'd like to introduce Tim Coates and really thank him for coming down to address us. Tim has nearly 40 years' experience in publishing, book retailing and consultancy, including working as MD of W.H. Smith's Europe and Waterstones. In the past 12 years, he's analysed and written extensively about the public library services and is the author of The Good Library Guide and Who's in Charge? Responsibility for Public Libraries, a report used in many countries to assess public library services. He's advised ministers, the DCMS and the Audit Commission on practical improvements to libraries, and perhaps most importantly for us tonight, has worked with councils in Hampshire, Portsmouth, Oxford, Richmond, Westminster, Cumbria, and most famously the London Borough of Hillingdon, to help improve book ranges, increase opening hours, and create welcoming buildings. In Hillingdon, working with a Conservative council, Tim helped to save 20% in costs in the library service, kept all the libraries open, and increased usage by 84%. Tonight, we hope he's going to tell us how we can do the same in Somerset, and not just save our libraries, but also our opening hours. Yes. So over to you, Tim.
We'll have to have a we're arranging signals. So if I do that, what do you change? Yeah. You can see it's all mirrors and smoke. Can you hear me? I don't propose to use the microphone because I hope you can hear. But if anyone does have difficulty, just say. Okay, I'll try, and then if you have problems at the back, but tell me that it's difficult to hear, and I'll speak louder, more loudly. First thing, I just want to just to sort of set a base for the evening, by saying simply that I am absolutely non-political. I have no interest in the party politics. So forgive me, or don't forgive me for that, whichever way you mind it. I don't mind at all, but I'm not political at all. And the other thing I want to say as a kind of base for the discussion tonight, I'm not, in any sense, wouldn't question this idea that the council has to remove 25% from the budget, and that includes public libraries as well. I mean, I've taken that completely as read. I understand the situation, and I'm not arguing with that. That my starting point is that has to happen, and what I'm talking about is ways in which it can happen, but still, I hope, bring improvement to the public library service rather than a reduction in the service. That's the challenge. I am going to talk figures, which is, I know for some people is a pain in the neck, but it's obviously with money involved, I need to. But before I start showing graphs and numbers and things like that, I wanted to show you a picture of a nice library, because that's what it's all about. It's buildings full of books, nice place to go and work, a nice building that's open. That for us all. And in all the market research, you are no different here to anywhere else in the country. That's the essence of what makes a useful and interesting and enjoyable public library. So so I'm going to go on to figures now. Absolute simple basics. In the consultation document that was put out by Somerset County Council in December, it explains that the budget for the public library service is £5.4 million. That means that's the money that the council allocates out of all the taxes that it gathers from whichever source. That's the amount of money that they allocate for public libraries. It's not the only money that they have, because in addition to the money that the council allocates, there is a certain amount of income that comes into the libraries. That's in part the money that you might pay in terms of rentals or fines or fees for odd things or different things for which you have to pay. And in the case of Somerset, it also a substantial part of it comes because of an arrangement that Somerset has with another 4 councils, I think, around you, in which Somerset do some of the work that the other councils do, and the other councils pay back some money to you. So the actual total amount of money for the library service isn't 5.4 million, it's actually 6.5 million. That's the point of that slide. Just nothing clever about it. And as that consultation document said, the council needs to take 25% of what it was giving, in order to, and that's the reduction in budget that they have to find. So that 25% is of their money. So it brings the budget down to 5.15 million. That's just going to lay in the ground what has to happen. Thank you, Tony. So we know, and I'm only hopefully stating correctly, that the proposal, which has just been revised this week, but the proposal is to withdraw the funding from a number of libraries, from 11, it was 20 of the libraries, and a set of other cost reductions measures and some income raising measures in order to meet their target. So that's the situation. That's what they have said that they need to do. I hope Tony doesn't mind me asking, but following that consultation, on behalf of the residents, some other questions were asked of officers of the council to provide a bit more detail, and the detail that was given explained with a list of the 34 libraries just how much they cost, with a good deal of detail about the staffing costs, the other costs relating to the buildings, how much the mobile libraries cost, and what the book fund is, and in fact what the materials fund is, it's called, which means books and DVDs and other items that they buy. So this table here is simply the figures that come from the council about the 34 libraries. That's what it costs, £3.52 million to operate the 34 libraries. Thanks, Tim. So we know that there's £6.5 million of money which the council would like to see reduced to 5.15 million, and we know that the libraries, the 34 libraries, cost £3.52 million to operate, and there's a gap between the two figures. I'm only trying to, I hope you understand what I'm saying. It's not too complicated, okay? So far you're with me. Thanks, Terry. So there is, the libraries and the mobiles cost 3.52 million, and 6.5 is the total. So there's a balance, which I've called, for want of an expression, non-frontline costs or non-library based costs, or whatever you like to call it, 2.98 million. Now, in the course of what I'm going to say this evening, I'm going to make 3 recommendations, and these are recommendations. It's not my position to make recommendations to the county council, but if you were to ask me what you might do as residents, my suggestion is to you that there are 3 recommendations that you might make to the county council. I think the next slide is the first one. Recommendation 1 is simply that, in the need which we accept to reduce the budget by £1.35 million from 5.4 to 4.05 with this line, the council should request the managers of the library service to reduce their net expenditure on non-frontline or non-library based activities from 2.98 million to 1.63 million. In other words, all I'm saying is simply, it would be better from your point of view, from the point of view of the library service that's operating, if they could find a way of taking that money from the back office instead of taking it out of the libraries themselves. Do you understand what I mean? Right. Thank you. Okay. Now, not quite the whole story, because every council in the country reports their library budget to a national body called the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Accounts. I think it's what they call something like that, but everyone refers to it as SIPFA. And and I've just put up the last 3 years because I have these. And in 2007-8, the net public libraries budget that Somerset County Council reported was 7 million, with an income of 1.1, making a total amount of funds available of 8.1 million. And in 2008-9 it was 7, and 2009-10 it was 6.8. And the budget, which they also report in the same annual round of, they call it estimates, but that's what it means, is 6.4. For the current year, the year that's in progress at the moment, The budget was 6.4 million reported, with income of 1.1, making a total of 7.5. Now I couldn't work out why, knowing those figures, why in the consultation document that you were shown, that the council told you that the budget was actually 5.4 million. Because that's not what they had, what they were reporting nationally. And what I wondered about that was, because I had an inkling about what the difference is, which I'll explain it. But what I wondered was whether the councillors knew that. I wondered what the councillors believe the library budget is, because I looked in the documents to see what it was they had been told. And the first point I think to make is that if the budget is, as reported to CITFA, 7.48 million, my blue line on the left, and the library-based operating costs, which is what we looked at before, are 3.52 billion, the cost of running the library fund, that means that the non-library based costs, the office costs, the non-frontline costs, whatever we're going to call them, actually amount to nearly £4 million. Are you with me? Do you follow my point? There's an awful lot of money that the libraries, that is expended on the library service on your behalf, but never gets near a library. That's my point. And I hope that graph is clear enough. It's the green box that worries me, because I think if the savings are going to be made, they should be coming out of that rather than out of the libraries themselves. Thank you. So my second recommendation is this, and it's a really serious one, and I would say this to any council in the country, because none of them do it right, with respect. Figures presented should be clear, complete, consistent and comprehensible to councillors and to the public. I think, because I've read the consultation document, it's not clear what the budget is. And therefore, the consultation document doesn't give you a picture of how money is spent. And I think that's an issue. And I think that councillors, if I were a councillor, I would say, please will you explain to me, will you reconcile the two figures? Please will you provide a reconciliation, this is the word that any sort of accountant would use, a businessman would use, between the two different figures, explaining what the expenditures are that account for the difference in the two. I'm not suggesting for a minute that this is money that doesn't get spent or anything like that. All I'm saying is there isn't a clear explanation of how it is being spent. And I say in my final sentence, without this, it's very difficult for any councillor to make an informed decision about how a proposed cut should be taken. And it's very hard for them to ask you to participate, as they must, and they should and they have, to participate in a judgment about the right way to make that cut if they haven't given you the correct information. Are you with me? Okay. Thanks, Terry. Now, I tell you, I'll be absolutely candid, I was surprised at these figures because I watched the figures from around the country. Somerset is notorious for having a very low libraries budget. Everybody says it. The amount of money per head of population is about £13, and it is one of the lowest among county councils in the country. So I was expecting to find that the budget would be quite a squeeze. In fact, I was rather putting my head on the line when I said I'd get involved in this, because I had been quoted in the newspapers a few weeks ago saying that I suspected that any council in the country, I could show how you could take a third out of the budget, a third, not a quarter, and not have any bad effect on the library service at all. And it was a rather dangerous thing to say, because there are bound to be some councils where it's a bit more difficult, and I thought Somerset was going to be one of them. I am surprised at the level of back office costs here. It's a very high figure. And one of the confirmations of it which worries me more is that the cost of staffing is reported in CITFA. It's very hard to get at the detail, but the cost of staffing is reported in CITFA. And I don't know if you can follow my kind of confirmation to myself that I was right about what I was seeing, was that in CITFA it reports the staff cost of the staff employed in the library service, not in the overhead as council generally, but actually by the library service, and it's reporting 4.3, 4.1, 4.1 million, 4.2 million. But from the figures that were provided after the consultation, the 34 libraries, only, the staff cost in them is only 2.2 million. In other words, the other 2.1 million is in the office, right? It's that to me was a sort of confirmation that what I'm saying is correct. Thanks, Tony. Now, we're all weary of hearing about cuts and how they're going to ruin all the services. What I want to try and show you is that there's another way of approaching this problem. And you kindly mentioned this work that we had done in Hillingdon, which is now 3 or 4 years ago. It's a long programme that they're doing there. It's going to take 6 or 7 years to finish. But they listened to what I was saying about these costs. The councillor there, and it's really important to understand how the really central role that a councillor takes in this. But the councillor said, I understand, and I understand that this is an issue which actually affects many departments in the council, not just the libraries people themselves. It affects the property department, it affects the HR department, it affects the computing department. We as the cabinet, this is a word you've become familiar with in Somerset, the cabinet will take control of a project to improve the library service, and we will take the cuts that you're talking about. And I'll just show you some pictures. Should I call this the charity shop look? It's my unkind way of describing what most public libraries in the country look like. You're quite familiar with that. So this is a library in West Drayton in West London, which is not the nicest part of the world, not nearly as nice as Glastonbury. I am absolutely certain of that. But it's a very functional library, and it's typical. Just watch that window, because it comes back in a few minutes' time. Just keep that shape of that window. And thanks, Tony, next one. Everyone paints the walls in the children's department, puts a coloured carpet down. It's not the end of the world. Okay, Tony, thanks. Now, within my office costs, my non-frontline costs, there are 2 big elements that make up that cost. Now, I have no idea in Somerset, what they are or how they are, but you need to find out. But this isn't Somerset, and it isn't actually Hillingdon, but it's a very typical kind of management structure. Hillingdon had slightly different names, but it more or less amounted to this. And you can't read what it says, but I'll tell you. At the top is the councillor, who is the person responsible for the public library service. And then you will have a director who has several areas of responsibility. The directors are the senior managers of the council. And then within whichever director at libraries falls, there will be probably a head of culture or someone a name with several functions. Then the chief librarian or head of library and information service, or whatever it's called. And then there will be some kind of senior management team, they call it, which will be partly operational. There'll be a team of librarians who normally operate as a slightly different thing from the operations team. They provide the expertise of being professional librarians. There won't be many of them, but there will be some. And then there's always a sort of distribution function going on, which I'll show you a bit more detail about, and a place where they process books, which means sticking hold of something or cataloguing or whatever it is. But it's a point where the books are kind of arrive and then they go out again. And then there's generally some kind of computing function which is particular to libraries. And then again down below that there's some kind of area management operation, and some all kinds of things. And then, but by the time you get to the library manager, the person is not very important at all, and has really got very little control over actually what happens in their library or in their town, because they've been told by so many people what to do by that point. All they're there for really is to lock the door at night. And then you've got the staff, and they're the people you actually meet. They're the nice people who, kind of you get to know every day. They're the ones who use, who are the heart and soul of the library service, to be frank. It's a very big structure, if I may say so. And the other bit of library management, which is jolly, jolly, jolly expensive, believe me, because you heard my background. I kind of, if a library orders a book, it comes through an amazing number of places to get to the library, And this is a kind of, kind of typical arrangement. The council bibliographic service, say, orders a book. The order goes off probably to a library supplier. The library supplier gets it from a distributor, which is a sort of Penguin warehouse, if you like. They send it to a wholesaler. The wholesaler sends it back to the library supplier. The library supplier then sends it to the council's own little warehouse. In there it is then processed, and then they send it off to an individual library. Now, this is a library book. I can tell you these cost about £1 or 50p really to produce. But by the time you've sent them round the universe and everybody's had a go at putting them in a box and sticking, this has got 8 labels on it. This is Westminster, it's not Somerset. And that's mild by comparison with some. By the time everyone's stuck labels on it, this now what was cost £1 that you might have bought for £4.99 or £5.99 in this shop, it's getting to cost about 20 quid. These supply chains are ridiculously expensive, and it's just a book, for Christ's sake,
Can I ask, why doesn't
Can we just
the counties go straight to the publishers?
Sorry? Yeah, well, I'm going to come to that. Mr. Mayor, forgive me. You're ahead of me, that's right.
Okay.
Only the Mayor is allowed to interrupt himself. Thanks, Dave. Now, in the kind of asking, we need to know more about this 2.98 or this 3.98 million pounds. We don't know anything about it, and we need to. And the only bits of information that seemed to be, I've seemed to have seen, was one that said that the cost of bibliographic system and systems service, which is servicing a number of councils, which I said, has a cost of 1.23 million. I don't know what is quite included in that or not. I know, but however, that the money that comes back from the other councils is about 320,000 because that appears in SIPFA. So I don't know whether I'm justified or not in deducting one from the other, but if the only figures that one can see, and it's up to the council to explain, no, so I'm going to keep talking because otherwise you can keep the question. Means that about £900,000 appears from any information we had to be spent. And how many books is it handling? Well, books and DVDs, about £380,000 worth. In other words, we're spending possibly £900,000 to handle £380,000 worth of books. This possibility isn't that you think we might be able to find a cheaper way of doing this. Are you with me? You understand? Okay. Rather than shut the libraries, for goodness sake. So all those issues were in Hillingdon, believe me, and they all are everywhere else in the country. Somerset is by no means the only place that this situation is about. We changed the management, we changed the structure in Hillingdon. It was tough, this is tough. But what we said was the two key people are the councillor, because somebody has to be in charge of all this, and the person who runs the individual library. So that when you go into the library, if you want a book, they can get it for you. They don't have to apply to 6 people up in an office 30 miles away. They're in charge. They've got the money. They can ring up... what the Mayor said. They can ring up the supplier and get it tomorrow. And we put the library manager in charge. We actually paid them more than they were being paid previously like this. And we made it sure that all the best staff, the most knowledgeable, the most experienced, were actually working in the libraries and not in the office. Yes, I know it's funny. It's funny. So the key people in this were in there. They have 19 libraries in Hillingdon. It's smaller than Somerset. 19 people, each one actually has the staff budget for their own library. Is in charge of what hours and how they manage their own rota. So they're totally and the stock budget. So all they're accountable for, and they are accountable for, is the service they give in their local community. And all the councillors ask of them is, your town's got to love you, or we'll give you some help. They're always very nice. But so the local ward councillor becomes a really important part. The local people become a really important part. What you want in your town is a function of library manager being like a kind of landlord in a pub, if you like. It's kind of like, you know, they provide the character, and they're the ones who make sure that the local schools get properly looked after. They make sure that the people who are in care homes got properly looked after, and they do it with volunteers. They get volunteers to come and take out boxes to, you know, to people in homes and things like that. But it's their job to make sure that all happens, and that's what they're tasked to do, and that's what they're measured. You know, if you as management. And the whole structure costs a fraction of what it used to cost. I mean, you can see that from the picture, thanks to it. And we simplified, as the mayor suggests, the supply chain. He was dead spot on. You should put him in charge. So now we cut it so the individual library, there's no servicing at all. We shut down the whole warehouse, council warehouse, totally. And the stuff just goes straight from the wholesaler, not even a library supplier, from a wholesaler, straight to the individual library, and it's there the next morning. If they exactly as the local bookshop would have it, you know, when they place an order, if they've got the right wholesaler, the stuff's there the next morning. So same in the library, boom, just like that. So, and that, believe me, saves a fortune. So, as I say, I don't know what the costs comprise in the Somerset office, you know, non-frontline stuff, but there are ways of cutting those costs dramatically. You know, you can save £2 or £3 million out of Somerset Library Service, and it wouldn't change. You wouldn't want to do that because you would want to put some of the money back, you know, and buy. For goodness' sake, the book fund should be over £1 million. You cannot run a library service with a book fund of 200,000. And this is what the libraries look like now. There's my window, that dirty old window, and we got some experienced shop fitters who I knew to come and do this. This cost the whole of the refit of the 1920 libraries in Hillingdon, and they will look like this by the finish, will cost £2.5 million across the whole estate. That's the whole estate, including one enormous central library that they have in Uxbridge. Now, I see reports of, you know, councils refitting one library for £9 million in Swindon. They're a waste of money. This looks fantastic, doesn't it? Yeah. I'm really proud of this one. and I said to the bloke, I'll go on holiday there, never mind, you know, the library. The next one. This is a smaller library. You can see it was built of a Nissen hut in the 1950s. Ghastly dump, and nobody went in. It was horrible. Now it looks fantastic, and this is not expensive. You can see it was done with a tasteful guy who knew what he was doing, and he opened up the lights in the roof. Everybody loves these libraries now. This is the 84% more use that you mentioned. Of course they use them. So they have loads of equipment. These have not just your ordinary PCs, but they have loads of Apple Mac computers, because kids at school love to have Apple Macs because you know, they need to know how they work just as much as ordinary PCs. So these libraries have loads of all that. They even have silent TV on, which you may or may not like, but they play the news on silent all the time. So it's quite nice. And the famous coffee machines, which if you those kids. That's one of the bigger libraries, or it's one bigger than the other one, and it's just nice, spacious. It's a library, for Christ's sake. It's just nice to go into. And this is the Starbucks concession that they have. That's the same library, which the staff run themselves. These are the famous white middle class, you know. And it says, wildlife and wild women are both endangered species. We put these quotations on the wallpaper. They're all first lines of books. I shall ask you at the end, that's the first line of which book is that? Is zero a number? And Mr. Funny lived in a teapot. I chose that one because it always made me laugh. The children's department's so lovely. It works just as well in old building. This is a 16th century barn that they have on their estate. People always say, oh, library's impossible if there's, listed buildings, you can't do anything with them. This is a listed building, grade 1. You just need a designer who knows what they're doing, because for Christ's sake, you know, Pizza Express use grade 1 listed buildings, don't they? And retailers know how to do it. It's just knowing how to do it. But that's a nice library. And the opening hours, these were one of these libraries that was open 2 mornings a week, and you could never work out which ones. You know those, and you always turn up on the wrong day. Not anymore. These libraries are open when they should be, 9 in the morning, till 7 or 8 at night most days. This is just a little village library. This is, you know, kind of population much smaller than Glastonbury, that's the same one again. Super, lovely. The only library costs improved book collection. The books are at the heart of it. If you don't, the kind of terrible mistake is to let the book collections run down, because then nobody uses the libraries. Then the council finance bloke comes along and says nobody's using the libraries, let's shut them. You've got to get out of that spiral. And I tell you, I did have an uphill struggle because forgive me, because I know that we've got government offices here. There has been this kind of great thing in government that books are not really important. It's all about computers. It's wrong. It's completely wrong. Actually, so it is 73% of women in this country read every week, and men it's slightly less. But it is the most popular cultural activity, reading books, for Christ's sake. That's why people use libraries. That's the main kind of reason for going into them. It's no good pretending they're hubs. For goodness sake, of course they're not. They're hubs. They're libraries. And they're not activity centres, they're libraries. As it said in the Independent this morning, if anyone saw the article. And it costs, this library service, it did cost a lot less, but actually that council is now opening libraries and extending things. It's actually, they're actually putting money into the library service because it won them the election last year. The London election, the London borough elections coincided with the general election. So all the councils around Hillingdon, all the London boroughs were up for election. Most of the Conservative councils lost. I know there's some councillors of different colours, I think everyone was thinking. But the Conservatives in most of the boroughs around Hillingdon, which is Harrow, Ealing, they lost their majorities. But Hillingdon increased his majority, and they believe that you can talk to the leader of the council. They believe a lot of that was because of what they'd done in the libraries, because it's so visible, it's so everywhere around the county. Everybody knew what they'd done, and these things are so popular. Thanks, Tim. So my third recommendation is let's get into a sort of dismal thing about cutting hours, volunteers. That's nonsense. It's absolute rubbish. Let's get into a programme which is actually improving. Then everybody will love the libraries. They'll use them for what they're useful for, and the council will want to do more. We're getting into a positive spiral rather than a downward spiral. So my third recommendation that I suggest that you make to the council is that you can make the savings but make them by reducing the non-library work and the costs, take them out. But then, at the same time, so once people can see this is an improvement programme, not a cost-cutting programme, you embark on a visible library improvement programme, concentrating on improving book collections, longer hours, and smarter buildings, particularly in the small towns and the small communities, because that's where they're really needed. Thank you very much.